Good morning. Okay, so today we're going to share with you our journey for collaborative learning spaces. I'm Deb. I think I have to always remember to do that. I think I've seen all of you outside, and so thank you for coming. Today we are going to do it a little bit differently in that we will have teachers from each grade level also sharing what it looks like specifically to that grade level. So instead of just seeing it in an overview, we really want to get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of our collaborative spaces, as well as take you on the journey of how we started, what it looked like when we started, to where we are now, okay? So we always start with our mission and our values and our attributes, and these are really the underpinnings of all the work that we do. This is what keeps ASD connected together and keeps us on a common focus. In addition, in the ELC, we have our early years philosophy. And this was created by faculty, and it uses the mission and the core values as an underpinning or a foundation for the work that we do, as well as our Reggio-inspired philosophy. So in the philosophy, we've highlighted keywords that really focus and point to the importance of collaborative spaces. So nurturing environments, all children, celebrating and respecting children, authentic opportunities, and the development of foundational skills. So in a collaborative learning space, children have authentic practice, opportunities to practice those skills that we are teaching, which are those foundational skills for building a responsible, collaborative adult in the world that they will move into. So with that, 3 years ago, Dr. Drugan met with the senior leadership team and really talked about how do we take all the amazing work that's happening in ASD and how do we keep it focused and central and really provide the opportunity to really go in depth with different initiatives. There's amazing initiatives in education, new things coming up all the time. But if you don't stay focused on something, you just kind of always hit the top of it, and you never really develop to a strong foundational depth, initiatives and experiences we provide for children. So for the ELC, we have 2 action plans. One is our collaborative learning spaces, and one is our story workshop. And then we have 3. And our third one is our PE, art, and music, integrating their disciplines into the classrooms as well. So our collaborative learning spaces focuses on the engage all and then include all strands of the framework for the future. And we had to create what does that look like and what will that long-term effects be for children if we spend 3 years really going in depth into collaborative learning spaces. So we know that flexible collaborative learning spaces, they support children's continued awareness of themselves, and it helps them choose how, what, when, and where they best learn. The environment is a huge piece to a collaborative learning space, and it needs to always stay adaptable and flexible to evolve. There needs to be a flexibility in that so that we're meeting the needs of learners and we are being responsive to what they need at that particular time. It also has to include a variety of spaces and opportunities so that we are meeting the needs of all learners, because everyone learns differently in different situations. And with that comes choice. And we know how powerful choice is for students, building their confidence, them learning who they are, helping them self-regulate, helping them self-reflect. They are part of the process, which also develops their problem solving, their critical thinking of this is how I see a space, this is what I need, now how do we get to that? It empowers them to own the space, and as you see, it doesn't take them very long when you drop off for them to say, nope, I'm good, I can go by myself, which is hard for parents. It's like, oh, I want you to be that way, but I want you to need me. They do need you, but they know that this is their space. So in involving them in the creation of the space, they own it and they feel safe and they think this is mine and I'm okay here and I know that this is where I need to be. So we give attention to children's authentic voice. It's not that, oh, tell me what you think you need, Mrs. Oh, that's great, but we're going to do it this way. We really do listen and we are responsive to what the children are sharing with us as we create the spaces. We focus on their transition from creating a core classroom community to what does that look like to create options for children to have a wider community within the triad or the two classrooms that share a similar schedule, and then what does it look like in a grade level. And they do this a bit in recess time, but this also is within the school day in the classrooms. The use of the physical space, how do we really maximize the space so that we are optimizing all of the space that we have? It's how we group students during learning time and how we use that space during teaching time. So those are all pieces that go into the decisions that we make for collaborative space. So our journey, it's important to see where we began to where we are. So in 2010, this was our classrooms. They were in this building. And this is one of our K-1 classrooms. And in 2010, we really started thinking about what does an early years learning experience include. Up until this point, K-1 was just kind of a less of K-2. So there wasn't a curriculum. It was, okay, K-2 does this, so we'll just do a little bit less in K-1, so they're ready for K-2. So in 2010, we started looking at what is an early years curriculum? What should those experiences look like? It took us, we were in that journey for about 7 years, and we began to then focus on what does the environment. At that point, there were much new research about the environment as a third teacher, and so we really got into, okay, let's read that and what does that mean? So this was 2017, where we really started to look at how do we make the space be an active piece of their learning, to year three, when we actually did some combining of classrooms. So this is where we started. Then we moved to 2020 when we came into the ELC during COVID, and so this is what the spaces were like. Some of you might remember these spaces, which everyone had a dot, we had halls, parents had to come in the gym, you had to stay on a dot, you got to stay on all of the COVID pieces. Here, teachers with masks, and so really that coming together and that using the space took a little bit of a back seat because of the requirements we had. Also this time, K2, because of how we had to spread out children so that we didn't have to put our little ones online, K2 was in this building. So the ELC only had K1 and pre-K. And at this time is when we also started having pre-K. So up until 2020, we did not have a pre-K program. So classes were divided between two classrooms, so we had a small enough number so that they could come to school every day. So we all survived this, and then we moved into, in 2021, we were still within COVID, but this was our playground. So this is the playground. This is like where the water is now, and this is where the TV and all the big slides right here. To give you a little bit of perspective, we knew that developing a collaborative space, we know and believe through all of our learning and our study with Reggio that children's voice is hugely important to all of those social emotional skills and them creating the space that is their space. So while we were still in COVID, we could actually take them outside, although their distance, and we worked with a architectural firm that does outside architectural work. They actually did Google Meets with the kids so that they could get feedback from the children. And we took them through what is the design thinking process. So this is then, and this is now. So in the spring of 2022, we began taking the children through, facilitating for the children the design thinking process of what did we want that outside space to look like. So that was our first attempt at engaging children in this very high-level process to create spaces. So, yeah, that's okay. These are the last 3 steps. And then we had, in the fall of 2022, we had 2022, we had the playground that we have now. That year is when K2 moved over to the ELC, and they began, in the fall of 2023, they began to take those K2 children who had already gone through the process in K1 through the same process in creating the K2 collaborative space. And so this has now brought us to date. While this was going on, pre-K was also working on their collaborative spaces that are outside. So they use more of their collaborative space in their outside, in their kitchen spaces, and Sarah will speak to that. So from 2010, this is now the experiences and the environment in which our children have their learning every day. So I think it's important to see that journey and the learning and the researching to do this right for our children. So with that, now I'm going to turn it over to the people who are doing this very specifically with each grade and age group of kids. So first is Sarah.
So my name is Sarah. I'm one of the pre-K teachers, and honestly feel very lucky to have started with pre-K and to see the journey it took to transform those spaces. So in pre-K, we decided to start by the outside, by the outdoor space. When we started, there was, again, a very blank space. And knowing how children play, they want to dig, they want to run, they want to explore, they want to get messy. So by keeping that in mind, we decided to create a mud kitchen or outdoor messy play area. And strategically, we have slightly different areas by each class. So the children actually go next to Miss Anna's class to get certain materials, go to Miss Aaron's class to get some of the mud kitchen materials. And just by observing how they play, the children naturally come together and feel comfortable in the space. So the big goal or focus really in pre-K is independence in their space and feeling comfortable by using that space. So usually, they're scared to leave the teacher's side and we have to show them what to do, but eventually, by now, they're running around by all the sides of pre-K and they feel really comfortable and confident by using the materials. So in that picture, for example, we put a few materials out, these tires, and a child by himself or herself cannot move it. So the kids are like, oh, let's do it together. So you can see that they decided to teamwork and help each other to move the tire. But then now they have to have a plan, like where is this tire going? So they have to problem solve together. And also at the picture at the bottom, you can see that they realize, oh, if I roll it, it will actually move faster. So there's a lot of skills that they learn by naturally playing and by naturally exploring these materials. So social skills, the kids are mixing from different classes and they get to make friends from different areas. Most of them don't actually know each other's names, but they say, you're my best friend, and tomorrow let's go dig a hole together. Or they see an ant and that actually influences an ant study in the classroom. So they bring a lot of these experiences from outside into the classroom, and that really affects, like me as a teacher, I'm constantly observing what are the questions, what are the things they're interested in. And especially in Dubai where they're not exposed to nature, we felt for this age group this is very appropriate for them. And like a few days ago, the kids will bring me treasures. So they find sticks, they find leaves outside. They're not scared to grab the ants, and they'll hand me the ants, and I'm like, okay, how do we take care of the ants? What do we do in the classroom? So it's really a valuable experience. The creativity and imagination, again, like they might observe an ant for weeks, and then I can see in the atelier they're drawing insects in their pictures. So a lot of it is them processing their environment and then asking those questions in the classroom. And lastly, learning through play. Like I think as much as we have themes and curriculums and standards, we still want children to be children and just be excited to be outside and run around. And the teachers are a part of that learning as well. Like last year I had a bee study. I'm like, all right, let's figure out what to learn about bees, and we'll talk to Miss Sandy, we'll visit the bees, we'll look at wax. So there's so much that happens outside, and then throughout the months, even the parents always tells me, they tell me like how confident their children feel or how excited they are to just be outside. Like we don't have to give them so many plastic toys. They really entertain themselves. And I think transitioning into K1, the teachers notice the difference between children that have been at the ELC and new children that are joining in. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the next few years, because every year the space changes with the students. You know, some years are really into water, some years it's into sand. So we're always ready to transform the space, but the children take ownership and we do it alongside with them as well. So yeah, that's pre-K. And I'll move to K1 with Charlotte.
So we are super thankful for having a pre-K program, because pre-K does all the ironing out and getting the kids ready, and then they transition to K1. So I'm Charlotte, I'm one of the K1 teachers, and I've been actually really lucky to be part of this journey, the process we've been through to get to where we are now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just focus more on how the collaborative space works in K1. As you're aware, K1 is really made up of two triads. It's triad 1 and triad 2. Miss Meenakshi, Miss Laura, and Miss Liz make up one triad, and then there's Miss Hiba, Miss Mada, and myself who make up the other triad. So if you look at the slide, I've kind of broken it up into like two parts in the year, but they're not set in stone, because every year can be so different based off the children that are coming from pre-K, their comfort level, what are they ready for, all the experiences that they've had in pre-K, how do we try and make that transition as smooth as possible. So like Sarah mentioned, in pre-K the focus is more on the outdoor space. Now in K1 we really start focusing on what that extension of learning looks like in the collaborative space. So typically at the beginning of the year, children are allowed to be in that collaborative space from day one. And I think having done this 2 years in a row now, and we know that is the end goal, is that we want them to be in that space. As a team, we decided we're going to start from get-go. Why get them used to something else and then have to get them used to something, being in the collaborative space. So from get-go, as a team, we decided that kids will have access to that collaborative space from day one. Having said that though, we're very, like Deb mentioned, we're very mindful of where students are at. So yes, though there may be some who are ready to go and be in that space and just engage with other children, we also are mindful of some who may not be ready. So we're very careful to make sure that we're not making kids go into that space. Whenever they're ready, of course, they know they have access to that space. So what does that really look like? So like I mentioned, they spend minimum of an hour in that space at the beginning of the year. There are some spaces that all early years children have to have access to. So you'll see block area and our dramatic play are always there, because there's so much content that can be learned in just those two areas. It's the ones that are like on the periphery of our collaborative space that we kind of change up based on what our students' interests are for that year. What is the teacher's role in that space, especially at the beginning of the year? We're out there, we're observing, we're just making sure, just this whole social dynamics of how kids are playing with each other, what are students leaning towards? And then teachers come back. In our grade level, we meet once every week. The triad teachers meet once every week to kind of just reflect and think about okay, here's what I'm noticing, or here's what you have to keep an eye out on. We also make sure to involve our assistants in the meeting so that the children are getting like a consistent message, no matter who the adult is in the space. So a lot of time and reflection goes in those meetings. As we've been through this, we're also now coming together as a grade level. So not looking at us as a triad, but making sure all kids in that grade level are now getting the same experience. So we actually schedule time just to do that. One great thing about the collaborative learning space in K1 is the integration of Arabic during playtime. So we are lucky to have Miss Sarah who comes in for that hour. She's in the collaborative space and she's really using language that's relevant at that moment. The minute we isolate it into, okay, everyone's going to learn their colors and whatever, fruits, vegetables, it's not relevant to them. And we found, having now done this, that children are actually really picking up vocabulary and having the confidence to engage with Miss Sarah in Arabic because it's through play. You know? The role, one big part, especially at the beginning of the year and I'd say through the year, is how we use that time to differentiate instruction. So when children have choice in where they want to be and they have the freedom to play, maybe not at the beginning, but I'd say by now, teachers are really using that time for that small group instruction or maybe one-on-one instruction. So like if our instruction assistants are out in the space, it really gives the teacher the time to work on those small group activities in the classroom. Middle of the year, so right now children have access just to the collaborative space. They don't go into the other teachers' classrooms at this point in time, not till they know what their expectations are, because even though we have common expectations in the collaborative space, each teacher has their own homeroom and we all have certain expectations. So we don't let them go as of now till we kind of very now intentionally, I would say we're going to start now building community. So the teachers go into each other's classrooms, we read stories to the group, we come together, we come up with common agreements for the plays. So all that, we have their class directories, so they're starting to get more familiar. Their favorite is every Friday we have a picnic together. So we all sit down and have a picnic together. And it's so fascinating because the first time we do it, everyone's kind of moving towards their class and we're like, no, you need to find another friend to sit next to. But by the end of the year, I mean, they're running towards, friends from other classes. So the big change is really when we now let children get into the other teachers' classrooms. So not only do they access the collaborative space, but they would now start going into, say, for example, my students would go into Miss Mada or Miss Hira's classroom. So we, again, come together as teachers, we talk about what are your expectations when my children come to your class or to your class. So we make sure that we're not disrupting the tone, being respectful of other teachers' spaces as well. Yeah. Like Deb and Sarah mentioned, we're constantly, that space is evolving constantly. So at the beginning of the year, kids unfortunately couldn't be outside. It was the beginning of the year. We knew that they had to have access to like sensory things in the collaborative space. So we had to set that up. Moving now since they have the opportunity to go outside, we are already thinking, okay, now what is it that we have to change? So we're constantly making that place change depending on the And yeah, I know this is way ahead, but one thing that as a K1 grade level, what we found is when our students are going to K2, it's really helped us in terms of how we place kids in the classroom, because now we're not just dealing with, I have to place my 16, but we can actually now look at personalities of our triad, or now even just a grade, the whole grade level. So we found that this was one of the benefits moving forward, is like to make sure that we're sending a class that really bring out the best in the whole. And having said that, Miss Alex.
Hi everybody, my name is Miss Alex and I'm one of the K2 teachers, and building on what pre-K and K1 have built, when they come up to K2, we take the skills that the children have developed and we build on for the next step. And so what that looks like is we view the collaborative spaces as an extension of our learning in the classrooms. So at the moment, we also have 2 triads, 3 groupings of classes in each triad. And our students, knowing that they've had the exposure to the collaborative spaces in K1 and pre-K, we know that they're ready for the next step, but we're also mindful at the beginning of the year that we need to take our time and build community all over again and build that sense of respect and understanding how the space works and how our classrooms, how we connect that learning to what's happening in our classrooms. So we take the time to develop this as a space to extend our learning. And at the moment, every triad, each class has an opportunity to use that space when they need it. So for example, we have the bigger spaces like the block space and the Lego space and the dramatic play and an inquiry area. They're in the collaborative space intentionally so that if students are not working in their small learning groups in their classroom, they have that opportunity to transfer their learning in one of these wider spaces where they connect with other members in the other classes. So to build on that collaborative learning and the connection piece is really big in K2. And you'll often find, no matter what time you walk through the collaborative learning space, you see the children documenting their learning in some way. So that could look like they're building a structure in the block center, and then afterwards they're taking the time to draw it and write about it. So that's how it's transferred in K2. Another way that you might see that is that they decide that they're going to collaborate with other members in each classroom, and together as a whole, that could be 6 children in different classrooms, they're deciding as a group what they're going to use that block space for, and then they use the collaborative skills that they've developed through the years to make that work. So you'll often see children document their learning through marker to paper, documenting, drawing what they're learning, and then writing about it. We also use that space to develop inquiries, and we have a few inquiries throughout our academic year, and we always leave a space in our collaborative learning environment to grow that inquiry in a wider group. So we work with 3 classes, and it could be about forces and movement. We're going to set up materials for children to explore that concept in the collaborative learning space. But when we're looking at inquiry, we have the option not just to look at our classrooms, but we get to connect with other kids in other classrooms as well, which is really, really nice. Of course, this style of collaborative learning space builds 21st century skills, and communication and collaboration being very, very important and very difficult for young children to master. So we'll be taking it to that next level in K2. And keeping in mind that the children take ownership of the space, we come together as a team to reflect on what's working well in the space, what is not working well, what are children interested in, what are they not interested in. We interview and keep in mind the children's needs and interests in that space as well. And we, in K2, we're able to work with them at a greater level to organize and develop the spaces. So we brainstorm with them, what do we need to develop this inquiry? Let's go get the materials, let's set it up. So the children know that they've taken ownership of that inquiry or that space, and so they feel invested in it. And I think that that's very, very important. I took this picture, and often I like to stand outside of the collaborative space and just look in, and you wonder, what are children doing? So you'll be able to see children in every different area, in different areas, engaging in learning, enjoying their time, and they know exactly what to do in that space, because there are opportunities that they have free choice and agency to use that space, but then also they know that when their classroom has small group learning or whole group learning, or they're connecting as their class community, they know that they need to come away from that space and go back into their own classroom. And so you will see them moving freely between the spaces, which is very, very nice, because it shows the great work that pre-K and K1 have worked so hard on, that we just take it to the next step and really elaborate on that space. And yeah, I think that it's still evolving at the moment. We're focused on our triad at the moment, so each triad has their own way of using the space and different timings and different schedules as well. So between the two, you'll see us using our space in a little bit different way, but similar, based on our own personal classroom schedules. We're always evolving it to the next level. Like at the moment, we're working with children. We've noticed that one dramatic play space is not really working well. The children are not really using it. It's empty on most days. So we've actually taken a step to talk to our students about why they're not visiting that space, what they would like to create, what can be a new space that we can co-create and construct and work with them to evolve. And that's the next step that K2 is doing. We're always looking at our space and thinking about ways to enhance it and to make it as an extension of our learning where students can grow. Yeah, so thank you.
Now it is your opportunity to ask if you have any questions about our spaces, about the process, about our journey. We're open to any questions that you might have. And a huge thank you to Sarah, Charlotte, and Alex, because they have that very insight, introspective experience to really be able to give you the really deep understanding and goings on in the day-to-day experiences. Yes.
What were your, creating this whole new space, you basing it on the geo model, what were your expectations for these kids, like going into grade 1? What did you think having this environment is going to give them in terms of tools, knowledge, or skill set that's going to put them into more mainstream environments?
Sure. I think all the opportunities for them to problem solve, for them to practice our core values, just practice how you engage with each other in a safe space through play. That's when those rich experiences happen. We can say this is how you're a really good friend, and we can practice and role model. But it's when they go into these spaces where we're not hovering over them. We're observing, but we're not in that saying, oh, you need to do this, oh, this is how you solve this problem, and letting it get a little messy and letting them have that conflict. If they don't get to practice how you are in conflict and how you can have healthy conflict and how you can come out of it because, I can think of, why do we do this? Or, you know what, maybe this isn't really where I want to play today and I would play somewhere else. If we are always controlling them, that muscle memory isn't there. And so then they get into maybe a little more critical situation or critical conflict, and now they don't have any skill set, they have nothing to go back to be able to solve their own problems. So that critical thinking, that problem solving, just getting along with each other is huge. So I think that is a piece. We call those soft skills. I don't think they're so soft. I think they're super important, that if we don't get those right, the math and the reading and the writing, that all gets minimized if kids can't function together in a group. So I think this really provides them the opportunities to practice what we're teaching, and you see them transfer. Well, we talked about this concept in math. We talked about measurement but then you'll see kids measuring with different things. Or do you have a measuring tape? Because we want to see how long this is. So they're taking those lessons that the teachers are teaching in those specific content areas, and then they actually go out and they practice it actually to a much higher level than anything we could set up for them. But I'll let these guys also go this way.
pre-K, I think a lot of the times it's viewed as they're so cute and small and tiny. I think they're much more capable. Like a lot of the lessons will talk about kindness, sharing, what does it mean to be a friend, what happens when someone says no. And these are things that adults struggle with. So when we teach them these skills, and we allow them the safe space to practice and we have this conversation. So if a child is crying, the children go and say, are you okay? What happened? How can I help you? So it's important to have that foundation before we worry about the letters and the numbers. They will come. They will not turn into adults that cannot read and write and have a passion. But I think having those core values that make you a good human being is the foundation that we focus on. Different grades, but I think for me, I'm like, this is what they need in pre-K, and we're capable to see that by the end of the year as well.
I think it's those, like Sarah said, it's the skills, those dispositions, those work habits that we're hoping, whatever the environment is, they're able to use those. So whether they're in the ELC or whether they transition to this building, we're hoping that that is what helps them be successful as they move forward.
And with the exposure to working in different groups collaboratively together in the spaces, children are familiar with other children in their grade level. So by the time they get to grade 1, they have these familiar faces. And by the end of K2, children do read and they do write. And so but we do place a lot of focus on developing these important skills that need to be mastered through exploration and mastered through the act of doing with their peers before they get to a more structured system.
Thank you. It's really nice to see sort of the thought process behind it. It's a really helpful space. I just wanted to ask, how do we as parents encourage this sort of thinking at home without kind of it going crazy? Like I have dots all over my house at the moment. I've been drawing under a table. That's great. And I'm kind of worried I'm going to have to install like a water feature at some point. So I just want to know, how do we kind of encourage it, but also manage it?
Yeah. How does it stay realistic, right?
Yeah, without kind of curtailing their spirit, so to speak.
Right.
So, Lena, just to be clear, are you talking about like how do you continue to develop this?
But even if the design-led process starts coming out, and you know, I don't know what they're going to be doing, but
Right.
the creative part's fine. But
Yeah.
tomorrow suddenly there's a space and she wants to draw what we want to do. How do we? I don't know how to encourage it without saying, okay, this is what is realistic at home, or this is what we can do at home.
And some things, that's the thing, right? And some things at home, you at the end of the day want your home to look like a home, you know. And in school we have a little more freedom to do this kind of more like the design process. But I think it's like, for example, if Kara wants to design something at home, maybe, I don't know, designating a space or like giving her some materials and having her like make a model, like draw what you want the space to look like, but also having them understand that what happens in school not necessarily can happen at home. You can encourage the problem solving and the creativity and all. It doesn't necessarily have to turn into like a product or something, but it's just developing those skills, like what do you want this to look like? So what materials do you think you would need? So I think it's just being, there's a fine line, right? There's a fine line of where, okay, what happens in school and what happens at home.
And I would say, speaking back to what shows, that those opportunities now is the weather is getting more able to be out of taking them to parks or taking them, and that's where that creativity and, what can you brought all these treasures. Sarah said you get all these treasures. Okay, we put them in a box and put them in a basket. I know some parents say, okay, we'll take in this box. These things stay in this box. You take it to your room, but these things stay in this box. And how can you play with those materials? What can you create with them? So you are doing a similar, you're exposing similar thinking, but it is a little more contained. But the more we can get them out into spaces where they can just be a little more free, the weather is now beginning to cooperate with that.
And Lena, sorry, just to go back, like something that all kids like doing at home, art. right? Like they all have like an art station. Like you said, they have dots everywhere. They want to, so it's like even just talking to them through the process of like, okay, like what else could we do? You could make the dots, but what else could we use those dots for rather than just making dots? Or they get fixated on one thing, rainbows, or butterflies, or unicorns. Right now they're all very interested in folding, right? Making those fans. Those fans are like just a thing, but for me, I'm trying to understand where that's coming from, but now how do I take that to the next level? Because I don't want fans just taking paper, but there's no thought really going. It's just that they enjoy that experience, which is great, but okay, like how do we now take that? So just like in art, what can you do with what's already happening?
So thank you for showing, because you can clearly tell that there's an evolution in education, and you guys have used the innovative space quite well physically and working with that with like the soft skills. My next question is, and I'm not encouraging it, but it's very child-based, but when they move to grade 1, we start the introduction of iPads and like digital learning. Have you guys thought about incorporating that, not using it as a tool to play or learn, but introducing like the confines of what are the protective ways of using digital devices? Like, let's be honest, all of our ELC kids have some exposure to the digital at home. Is there a way that, because you guys do such a good job with like stranger danger and personal space, is that something that you guys could introduce at the ELC where they kind of get more ready for the digital learning using devices or in that world?
Definitely. I don't support completely cutting off technology. It's a part of the future. So we often discuss how can they use technology to empower them as a tool. So in pre-K, for example, the children know that the iPad is for taking pictures. So usually by January, I have a photographer job in the classroom. So one kid would go around, take pictures of all the projects, what the kids saved, and then they know this is going for mommy on Seesaw. Or if they want to send a message to a parent, they know that I can record their voice. So they understand that I use it as a tool. If they, for example, want me to draw a unicorn, like I can't draw it for you, but I can show you a picture that you can look at. So again, it's like, oh, I can put the iPad next to them with a picture. Or if they're asking me a question about ants, I'm not sure, I'm like, oh, let me look it up online. So they see me use the technology as a tool to answer questions and problem solve, and they mimic that. So it's not about putting a screen and they just watch movies. Even if there's a nice book that we read and I find the online version and I get to show them that, but they still get to see me use it in that way, and then I slowly allow them to use it. But then in that process, I teach them how to use it safely. So with every material in the classroom, I say, this is the iPad, you have to hold it this way, we have to charge it here, so that becomes a lesson. So when we do give them the iPad, it's not this amazing secret that they have to take it away and run with it. They actually respect it and they understand. We actually introduced coding later in the year. So we use Ozobots, where it's like little bots that can follow the lines. And that's early coding skills. There's a lot of little technology tools that we use, but they don't know the difference because we've introduced it as a tool. And then that again progresses into other grades. So we normalize the iPads and we normalize the technology. I think the more that we hide it away, the more that they want it. So we have that conversation with the kids. Because we can all see the difference in the beginning of the year where they're like exposed to all the screens, and then towards the end it's normal and it's okay. And they ask questions and you teach them and we go through that process together.
In K2, we also, of course, we use our iPad as a tool when we need it. Honestly, there's a handful of times that I've taken out the iPad, and that goes to show that we try to use concrete materials within the learning space and only take the iPads out when necessary or when we introduce a tool. So in K2, towards the end of the year, I have used the iPads to research a topic on animal habitats or a particular animal, but we use an app particular to that, and we teach children how to type out the animal that they're researching, how to press the enter button, and then the information will come up and how to read that. So, but that is a tool. So they're not, children are not taking the iPads out individually and on it or using particular other apps throughout the day. It's very, very focused on specific lessons and specific projects. Another way that we've introduced it is through the lens of photography. So we go out into our environment and take pictures of, let's say, different structures or different shapes within our outdoor spaces, indoor spaces, gather all of their images, and we learn to, select the best 5, and then we print those out and then do something else with it in the classroom. But again, it's used as a tool, so they know that there is an option. Our classes have 10 iPads each, but I'll be honest, we very rarely take it out because we want them to interact with people. And we know that when they transition to grade 1, they might be using the iPad a little bit more than they have in K2, but in grade 1, that's an opportunity for their teachers to go over the safe protocols of how to use the iPads for particular lessons, because when they get to grade 1, they're more mature and they're more able to absorb that information. In the early years, they are still very much learning, and we don't expect them to be able to navigate the iPads independently. So that's very particular. We use it as a tool, and it's very few cases throughout the year. But if we do use it, we do teach them within this framework. This is how you do it.
I think, sorry, we also have we're lucky to have digital resources that have all tried to be scrutinized by the IT. We go through a process. If we want to get a new resource or an app for our students, there's one protocol that we have to go through. So that's in terms of safety, what kids have access to. It's not I'm going to Google, say for example, tigers. We use the school recommended so that they don't have these sudden things of stuff popping up on the screen. So we're very careful with what digital resources that we use. Yes.
Have you guys looked at the results of now the story workshop program, now that you've kind of had a few years to work on it, and then has there been a change? Because I was a grade 1 doing a lot of results from past testing. Have you seen an impact or a very performance outperformance? And then the other part of transitioning to grade 1, how well the kids went from using this amazing, beautiful, super fluid, go wherever you want space to the more traditional space on the other side, where they have a little bit more tighter time to get through a lot more content and lining up in a succinct way to get to lunchtime so it doesn't eat into the short time that you have anyway. Have you guys thought about that more physical space transition?
So for story workshop, what we do find is that their stories are richer. They use more adjectives, or there's more complexity to sentences, because we have really focused on that oral language piece. And so we know oral language builds is a prerequisite to written language. So they are able to practice it and share stories orally through the use of whose cards. We have found that, and I can speak specifically to K2, you can see a difference in children that have had pre-K and K1 and children that are new to K2. Initially, you see a difference in the structure and the depth of their story. So we are seeing that does equate. We do put structures in place for children to read those speakers. When they move into first grade, the first grade team, Joy and Jean also focus on, it is that transition and what does that look like for them to move into a different environmental setting. What does that look like? So they do that. What we do work with K1 or K2 and grade 1 do have some common professional learning on materials that we use for numeracy instruction. I think it's also important to make sure everyone's aware that K2 uses the same resources as grade 1. So we have the same phonics, the same math, the same reading and writing. We use the exact same resources, and we have to follow the exact same criteria that first grade has to follow. there is that connection, so it's not, oh, you do this and then you do this. The curriculum is scaffolded and the standards are scaffolded so that we're not creating gaps. So we're very aware of providing a transition and doing the foundational work. Our foundational work is teaching K2. They get all those pieces for K2. They have now the foundation that prepares them to go to
To add on that, towards the end of the year, K2 does a really good job of connecting with grade 1 in that transition. So we visit the grade 1 spaces, we talk about the grade 1 spaces. The children have quite a few opportunities to connect with the children in grade 1. So we visit about 5-6 times before we actually they make the move in September. So at least they understand what the physical environments look like, what the structure of their day kind of looks like. They get to meet some of the teachers. Each classroom engages with another classroom, so we share questions back and forth between the two classes. So we build that connection in that community so that they are able to transition. And the children that do need extra support transitioning, we provide them with support in that way as well, with early visits and stuff like that. So we try to make sure that all our learners feel confident to move up to grade 1. And yeah, we let grade 1 do their work there as well. I visited Reggio Emilia, and I know that this is a question that always comes up in our trainings. And exactly the way that we experience it here, they experience it in their own way, because their environments from infancy, actually, for the infants, are so interesting and innovative and collaborative. And then, of course, in the Italian system in grade 1, it's very, very rigid. So you get this like utopia where you're learning, and it's like incredible. People from around the world are just intrigued. And then, of course, everybody comes with that, well, what happens when you move to grade 1? The children doing the foundational work where it needs to happen, and in their critical years provides them with the skills to move on in different settings, because as they move throughout the grades, it will change. It will change more than once. So I believe that we set them up for success.
One last bit. Just curiosity, is there a reason why you change the classes up every year so the children are with different children?
Yes, we feel just as it's important for them to be able to mix and mingle here, it's important for them to have some new friends as well as some returning friends. So when we do classes, we do make sure that every child is with at least one, and we very seldom have pairs because it is transient. If you only put a pair, one of those is going to move over this summer, and now you have a single. So it is important that they go with someone that they knew from last year. Many times what we see is very quickly, yeah, they're still friends, but they build these amazing new relationships and new friendships. And so it is just as our collaborative spaces where there's opportunities to build those social skills with a variety of people. The same would be true for classes. So it does happen in elementary as well.
So you change every year for the high school, or?
I can speak to middle school and high school. That's a whole schedule. That's a world that we don't step our toes into. But I know some of that is what are your interests, what are your passions, they begin to track. And so you might be with kids that are similar over multiple years, but every class wouldn't be. So a class that you're is art and you're you're probably going to be with similar people. Your social studies or your English class might be a total mix of totally different.
Understood.
But they're a little older by then too.
I can weigh in on that a little bit. I've got a high schooler and a middle schooler as well. They were in elementary. One of the benefits of switching it up is by the time they get to high school, they know everyone grade. And they're just comfortable being in different classes with different people. And I think it really helps, especially when they're in situations where they have to present and it's sort of a public speaking class or something like that. It really sets them up to be able to be more confident. So it's a great
And then also affirm on them moving to the elementary school, the more friends you have to deal with social projection and different friendship, like evolution, it really helps if like, you know, your best buddy is not your best buddy anymore. Have other people to like support you. It's been a huge impact.
In doing the classes every year, you know, we wish someone would invent what is that, program where we just put the kids in and they churn out these amazing balanced classrooms. But I think every time we do it, like like Catherine said, like you can have like the best buddies, but sometimes those best buddies can bring out the worst in each other as well. Not intentionally, but they can. So it's like nice to mix it up. By the 7th year, we already kind of know, oh yeah, we're going together. I remember conference time, I remember with Catherine, I don't think we're going to be having them together, whatever. Not because of anything, we just want them to kind of flourish themselves.
And the kids remember, like, I mean, you come in the playground, K2 kids come, they're like, oh, you're my pre-K teacher, and that's my pre-K friend, and that's my K1 friend. So it's, again, being adaptable is a really good skill to have, and the kids know, like, I think we stress more about it. They're like, okay, cool, bye, it's my new friend. It's not as bad or